Welcome to the Ingress Insights podcast, hosted by PkmnTrainerJ. Ingress Insights is a podcast about the Niantic game Ingress. Listen each week for the latest news, updates and rumours. Let us know your thoughts by leaving a voice message or emailing us at the links in the show notes.
Hello agents, and welcome to episode 35 of the Ingress Insights podcast. In this week's episode we'll be going over the final Shard Skirmish results. We also have an interview with the face behind the Prime Memes channel and be discussing whether there'll be medals for certain events coming up and some issues with getting the OPR live badge tick. But first of all, I'll move in and talk about the Shard Skirmish results that happened recently. Before I get into the Shard Skirmish results, just a small apology. This podcast is scheduled a bit later than usual, just due to timings of when the Shard Skirmish end and the fact I need to get some rest. But that being said, I'll start by getting into the results of the Shard Skirmish. Starting with Buenos Aires, the Enlightened got 6 shards there versus the Resistance's 3 shards. So that was 3 points to Enlightened and 1.5 to Resistance. In Paramaribo, there were 0 points across the board, unfortunately, for both Enlightened and Resistance, so 0 points there. In Villa Velha, it was 2 to the Enlightened shards-wise and 8 to Resistance, so 1 point for Enlightened, 4 for Resistance. Baltimore saw Enlightened get 6 shards and Resistance get 4, so that was 3 points to Enlightened and 2 to Resistance. In Louisville, it was 12 shards to the Enlightened, 0 to Resistance, so Enlightened got 6 points there, and Resistance obviously got 0 points. Providence was an even split with 6 shards each, so 3 points each to each faction there. In Quebec City, it was 6 shards to Enlightened versus 0 to Resistance, so 3 points for Enlightened, 0 for Resistance there. And it was a bit different in Santo Domingo with 0 to Enlightened and 10 to Resistance. So 0 points for Enlightened there and 5 to Resistance. Tallahassee was the exact opposite with 10 shards to Enlightened and 0 to Resistance. So 5 points there to Enlightened, 0 to Resistance. In Temuco, it was 6 shards to Enlightened versus 5 to Resistance. So 3 points to Enlightened, 2.5 to Resistance. In Bryan, it was 8 shards to Enlightened, 2 shards to Resistance. So that ends with 4 points to the Enlightened, 1 point to Resistance. In Cusco, it was an even split, but that time being 5 shards each, so 2.5 points each there. In Minneapolis, it was 8 shards to Enlightened, 4 to Resistance, so 4 points to Enlightened, 2 points to Resistance. In Panama City, it was a Resistance sweep with 13 shards going to Resistance, so they got 6.5 points there. Enlightened got 0 points. In Springfield, it was 11 shards to Enlightened, 1 to Resistance, so 5.5 points to Enlightened, 0.5 points to Resistance in Springfield. In Edmonton, it was 9 shards to Enlightened, 2 to Resistance, so 4.5 points to the Enlightened, 1 point to Resistance. In Puerto Vallarta, it was 3 points to Enlightened, 6 points to Resistance, so 1.5 points to Enlightened, 3 points to Resistance. In Santa Fe, like one of the others, it was an Enlightened sweep this time with 13 shards to Enlightened, so 6.5 points to them and 0 points to Resistance. In St. George, it was 12 shards to Enlightened, 0 to Resistance, so that's 6 points for Enlightened there. In Eureka, it was almost a Resistance sweep with just 1 shard to Enlightened versus Resistance 11 shards, so 0.5 points to Enlightened versus 5.5 points to Resistance there. In Fresno, Enlightened got all the shards there, having 8 shards versus Resistance 0 shards. 4 points to Enlightened there and 0 to Resistance. In Oceanside, Enlightened also captured 8 shards, but this time Resistance were able to get 4 shards. So that was 4 points to Enlightened versus 2 to Resistance. In Richland, it was 10 shards to Enlightened versus 3 to Resistance. So 5 points for Enlightened, 1.5 points for the Resistance. In Anchorage, it was again 10 shards to Enlightened, but versus the Resistance 2 shards this time. So that was 5 points to Enlightened and 1 point to Resistance. And the final one in Hillo was 11 shards to Enlightened, 2 to Resistance. So 5.5 points to Enlightened and 1 point to Resistance. This means the total score there was 85.5 points to Enlightened versus 45.5 points to Resistance. So this means that the series score, with having 2 more anomalies to come, is Enlightened 554.3 versus Resistance's 417.3. So it could all change. Things have been tight in this season so far. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out for the last few anomalies we've got left in June next weekend. But that's all for the Shard Skirmish. I'll move on to our next section now. After a small delay, the strong integrity checks for Ingress on Android devices have now started. Some users have posted up that they've got warning messages that their device is no longer compatible. I've covered the strong integrity checks a couple of times on this podcast previously. I will include a link back to how to make sure that your device can pass those strong integrity checks. Unfortunately, in some instances, it may just be that you need a newer device for Android. There's no strong integrity checks at the moment or equivalent on iOS, so you are okay if you've got an older iPhone as long as it meets the iOS OS security requirements there for Ingress to make Ingress actually work. There's no issues there. That has started, so do take caution if you're on an Android device and see the strong integrity checks pop up, and make sure you can still continue playing Ingress, obviously, if you want to. And I'll move on now and talk about Second Sunday, which is happening today. Second Sunday is today, running from 12 AM to 11:59 PM your local time. For this Second Sunday, as all the previous ones, the goal is to complete at least 6 unique missions. Again, these can be missions you've done in the past, but you cannot do the same mission 6 times. It has to be 6 unique missions to be able to get a tick on the badge, and this is expected to change in Q3. We don't yet have the Q3 events posted, but people are hoping there's some kind of change, as Niantic have been saying that they'll be reviewing Second Sunday and see how it can change moving forwards to be a bit different, because some people are getting a bit bored of doing the same 6 missions over and over if you've not got much else in the area or you can't travel out and get much else. But I'll be excited to see how that changes, if it does change in Q3. But as I said, it's today between 12 AM and 11:59 PM, so you can go out in your local area or go further afield and get 6 unique missions and explore, and then get a tick on your Second Sunday badge. A non-Ingress event coming up on June 14th is World Blood Donor Day. For this, many agents go out and donate blood or plasma, and the folks of the Red faction will send out a special embroidered Ingress themed patch for giving blood. For that, you just need to take a photo of yourself with your Ingress agent name somewhere in the picture whilst you're donating. Post it to a social media platform and then fill out the form on their website. I'll link to that on there. And if you can't get out to donate blood, or you can't do it for whatever other medical related reason, you can help raise awareness instead. So an agent, Control-Alt-FCK, has created and shared some files for a mission banner. So I'll link to the post about those from the Ingress Updates channel, and then you can see how you can claim your Red Faction Ingress badge for donating blood, and also share the mission files and create a new mission if you want to do that as well. We have covered the Ingress report that's recently been coming out on this podcast with all the great video and the work behind the scenes they've been doing there. And NIA have been so impressed with the work of those agents, they've awarded the Edgar Allan Wright badge, which is, it says it's aided Operation Essex founder Edgar Allan Wright. It's a badge that's rewarded for doing great work for Ingress generally, and that's been awarded to those behind the Ingress report. So Kate Vinci, Cod, Bill and Adam, and Vidicon Res. And it's, as I say, one of the rarer badges in Ingress, but they've been awarded that in their scanners. So if you want to check their profiles, you can see that. I'll put a link up to where you can see how that's been awarded, and hopefully one day I get a similar badge for doing the podcast when it gets the same amount of numbers as the Ingress report, but not quite there yet. So I'll move in now and just talk about some Ingress related issues for getting the Wayfarer awards. The most recent Wayfarer challenge ended a little while ago, and Niantic had previously said that all rewards, including the OPR Live badge tick, would be sent by the end of June the 5th. However, Niantic Aaron posted up to say, "Hello Explorers, due to unforeseen circumstances, there's been a delay in processing and distributing rewards to all eligible Explorers. Our team is working diligently to resolve the issues and ensure that all eligible participants receive their well-earned rewards as soon as possible. Moreover, we identified an issue with the OPR Live badge ticks that is causing some eligible agents to not receive these. So if you've not received your rewards, if you post in the forum thread that I'll link to, and the team will then look at that and see if you've not yet received them and send you further updates there. Fortunately, I got all my rewards pretty quickly. I know there was a bit of a delay where people were wondering who would get what rewards when, but because I play Ingress and Pokemon Go, generally I'm in the last batch to receive the rewards via email. But my OPR Live badge tick did come pretty quickly after the event ended. But as I said, if you've not got your rewards yet and you need to qualify, you can post in the Wayfarer forum thread, and then the team will look into that further for you. In most countries around the world, next Sunday is Father's Day, and we got a Mother's Day Ada medal for Mother's Day in the US earlier this year. So I'm just wondering who you think may be the face of a Father's Day medal, or if we'll even get one for Father's Day. So I'll leave that as a question on the podcast to see what you think and who will be the face of the Father's Day medal, if anyone. And then I'll move into some news that we've got from Brian Rose on Twitter, and then move into our interview with the Prime Memes author, and then get everything wrapped up after that.
You're no one if you're not on Twitter, and if you aren't there already, you've missed it.
As I mentioned, we got an update regarding Ingress from Brian Rose on Twitter. So he noted, "Core subscribers, help us field test a new experimental feature on Intel Map. You can download a JSON of shard jumps for the Shard Skirmish happening today to track what shard move where, or maybe even create your own shard tracker visualization." So if you go onto the Intel Map, you should be able to see something down in the bottom of the screen that says download shard jumps. This will give you a file that you can then import and view details of the shard jumps. It's not been announced yet on the Niantic site, and it's just a feature for core subscribers. As this was only announced 16 hours ago as I'm recording this, I haven't yet seen any sites implement this to show off the shard jumps, but people are working on it. But if you are a core subscriber, obviously people working on various sites like this may not have access to the file. So if you're able to download it and share it, that would probably help them out a fair bit. But I'll be excited to see what agents are able to do with this file. I'm not sure it's the first thing I would have wanted as a core subscriber, but I have to see how that goes and how it's used going forwards. Besides that, for Twitter, Brian Rose was at Oceanside Carlsbad CA. It was captured by Enlightened for the Shard Skirmish. He noted that one agent even paddled out to create blocking links and isolate the play box. So that was a bit different way of handling the Shard Skirmish and doing things there. But I think that's all from Brian Rose and the rest of the Ingress team on Twitter for this week that they've not shared elsewhere, that I thought I'd cover in this segment. So we'll continue on with the rest of the show.
I'm told the Twitterverse is full of rubbish, but most of us are really quite refined.
That's the end of our news, so we'll now move into our interview, as hinted at and mentioned in the show, with the founder and author of the Prime Memes Telegram channel, where I see various memes about Ingress Prime being shared and people sending things in as well. So without further ado, we'll get into that. Welcome, agents, to a special section of this Ingress Insights episode, where we have an interview with Geo, who is one of the people behind the Prime Memes Telegram channel that you probably know and have seen and shared various memes from. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first of all, Geo, and say hi.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name is Victor, or as most people call me, Geo. I'm an Enlightened player and have been playing since 2015.
That was going to be my next question, asking about what faction you are. So you already answered that, being Enlightened. With that being the case, are you happy with the recent string of wins the Enlightened seem to be having at the Anomalies?
Oh, I'm totally loving it. It's amazing.
It was pretty close till the last round of Anomalies, wasn't it? I think it was 1 point in it, but now we've streamed ahead, so that's been nice.
Yeah, exactly.
And in the Ingress game, is your Ingress agent name Geo, or is it something different?
It's the full name is Geo Zukunft, which is basically like Geo plus future. So sometimes people also call me Geo Future. But my name originally came from doing geocaching, and I came up with the name when I was like 12 years old. I can't exactly remember how I came up with it, but yeah, I've been sticking with it ever since.
Yeah, I think that's been quite a few Ingress players starts doing geocaching. I know I did a bit myself when I was younger, and then kind of dropped off when the geocaching app charged a lot of money at some point, and then found Ingress after that. And obviously, yourself, as I mentioned at the start of the show, we see a lot of memes from you under the Prime Memes Telegram channel. How did that all get started off, and how did you come up with all of them? I guess my other question.
I'm not sure if people remember, but back when OPR launched, there was a Telegram channel which was posting the worst OPR submissions, portal submissions. And back then, I thought that was really funny. And that was like, I think in early 2018 or mid 2018, something along those lines. And at some point, I thought, why not make a channel and post memes in there? And well, I started, and at some point, I just had more and more people joining and more people sharing it around. And yeah, at some point, I stuck with it and said, well, I'll keep going and continue doing it.
Anyway, this is my life now. I've accepted it.
Exactly. I fully accepted posting memes. I mean, sometimes I post more, sometimes I post less. If there's more funny stuff going on, I usually post more. I guess posting memes is also a way to cope if something is going wrong in the game. But yeah, there's one thing I always make sure. Obviously, I could post memes. Like I get submissions for memes all the time that are like bashing either of both factions, but I try to keep the channel like free from memes that are actively like poking fun at the other faction or like pushing down on the other faction. Like I will not post a meme if either faction just won an anomaly about winning the anomaly. I'm not doing that. I try to keep it neutral.
Yeah, no, understand that completely. I know on the Ingress community forums, there was often memes when the Enlightened won or Resistance won. I remember the Bernie Sanders one got shared quite a lot.
Yeah.
From there. I know your channel was pretty neutral.
It's always like this fine line. Okay, how far can you go? Because obviously there's like some great submissions. There's obviously one thing I keep getting all the time is like, oh, Enlightened won. Which punishment is Enlightened gonna get for winning the anomaly from Niantic again? So that's a meme that keeps coming up. Depending on how far it goes, I tend to post them or not post them, but it's always it's a very fine line to know, okay, what can I post without upsetting people? Because I obviously don't want to do that. Like I want to have both factions have fun and not like fully bash one of the factions.
Is there a particular post you think of that has gotten people annoyed or upset that you then had to remove?
I think I had like 1 to 2 memes that I took down after some time because I saw that the reception wasn't good, and like I hadn't properly like thought about posting them, and there were submissions like when in 2019 I did like this meme-a-thon for like I think 36 hours or something like that, and that was shortly before the Los Angeles anomaly. And I think that I had 1 or 2 slip through there that in hindsight I deleted because I thought, okay, no, they're kind of distasteful memes and I don't want to have them in there.
That's fair enough. It's always good to have a think on what you've posted and remove them if they're no good. So I know recently there's been a whole lot of badges to either earn or buy in the Ingress store. Is there a particular badge that you're most proud of earning, or one that you really want to get at the next level?
It might sound a bit controversial, but I really like my Guardian, purely because I essentially got it without like having to do anything for it. Like I got my Guardian finished before I think I was just level 8 or something like that. Like I hadn't even properly started playing and I already had gotten it. Even had 2 portals. One just got destroyed like a week before because another player started locally. But it was like a fun thing to keep for me going, and I think I ended it at like I think 450 days. I think is when my portal died because I forgot to recharge over Christmas. So that was a bit unfortunate. But the badge reminds me of like the first like 1.5 years of playing the game. That's why I have a strong connection to the badge.
Would you want it to come back, or do you think it can come back with how the game is at the moment?
I don't think it makes sense to bring it back because yeah, it just has too much negative gameplay types attached to it of people Guardian hunting to the very last second, and like I technically don't mind like people blowing up another portal like 1 day before if they actively like saw somebody capture the portal. But if you go ahead and like scrape the intel to get that information, I think that's too far above the line. To be honest, it's like 99% of people that took down other people's portals were definitely like from scraped data. So like you cannot talk around it. Like there's no point in bringing it back because that would just like fuel up that thing again. And I don't think it's a positive contribution to the game.
No, fair enough. I think I only end up getting my Guardian to silver, so it's just sat there forever silver for me. But yeah, I don't think with all the changes and how it works, it would work at the moment unless it was drastically changed somehow. But I agree with you on that. And just thinking about things that you might want Ingress to bring back, things like that. If you did get a kind of one wish from an Ingress genie or whatever, what would that be? How would you want the game to change?
I would want there to be incentives for me to recurse. I finished being level 16, I think 2 weeks after Prime launched, and recursing became a theme. But I decided to not recurse unless there would be a significant, like, not disadvantage, but like unless there's an advantage I could get from recursing. And I'm not talking about like getting items and being able to use variable beacons, because I don't think that adds so much to my gameplay that I would want to do it. Because playing to level 16, like doing it all over again, wouldn't drive me to play more. I'd want there to be some additional things in the game, like something that for every recursion you get, I don't know, like 1 inventory slot more or something like that. Something that gives me a bigger motivation to like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and play for 40 million AP again, and instead of just like, oh, you get some more items and you get to use variable beacons.
The free monthly kinetic capsule in the stores, not what you wanted. So that's a recent edition.
Considering I have like 50 kinetic capsules in my inventory at the moment, not really. I really liked my quantum capsules, or MUFG, however you want to call them.
You wouldn't want to bring them back as your
I
wish?
wouldn't want to bring them back. I also would like to rename Aegis shields back to AXA again, because yeah, that's what I started with. That's what I've known them always, and it still feels weird to not say AXA to them.
Sure, AXA would be happy their branding's kind of stuck with it beyond.
Yeah, exactly.
change.
It's like the same thing with like the hypercubes, the Circle K and
the
what was it,
Lawson
Lawson?
ones.
Yeah, and having, I mean, we still get to keep like the soft banks and the I2 plus and minus, but I really like the other brandings as well. Like they weren't annoying, but it was a shorter name than typing out Aegis Shield or Quantum Capsule.
Yeah, I agree. It was nice to have some with a nice quick name, and for some people they probably don't know things like ITOEN or AXA brands necessarily, so just what they're called to them.
Exactly. It's like it doesn't hurt the gameplay, but I still think it's a nice touch to have them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And thinking about like what's happened previously in the game, is there like a favorite piece of lore or Ingress character you've got, something that happened normally that you think was really good storyline wise?
Personally, I haven't been keeping too much track of the storyline basically ever since Prime launched. I feel like the way the story evolved beyond that just over time kept getting less and less, and I got less and less invested. Like when there was still the Ingress report around, I used to like every time a new episode came out, I used to immediately watch it. It was like you got to see like part of the lore and you got to hear about agent stories and everything. And I feel like that all died down to some degree. Even now, like theoretically the anomaly is supposed to mean something for the lore, but even after the anomaly is over, you don't have any channels anymore to properly get to know, okay, what happened now with the story. Like, okay, you get an occasional post in the official Ingress Telegram channel or on Twitter. Now with the forums gone as well, I feel like that's even less possibilities for them to have like a proper storyline that people can be invested in, because I think that most people don't really care about the story, even though it would be interesting. But I feel like that nowadays the way the story is like distributed to people is not making people actually notice it and be able to get invested into it.
Makes sense. And I think for myself as well with the story, it's not helpful when there's delays in what happens. Like we had the thing of finding out who the shapers were, and that took months and months to come out. And now we've had cryptic memories, and it's meant to change the faction identity of a redacted person, and that was months and months ago, and we've still not got a resolution for that.
Exactly.
So,
and like back in the day, I mean, even if it was terrible, Enlightened 1 Obsidian and Exam got removed like a week later and was like gone, I think, for 2 weeks. Like you immediately had an effect after the anomaly, like what happened, or with the I don't know what they were called, some shields that were available during the Prime series in 2018, 2019. Like there was some effect to winning anomalies and or losing them. And that's what I'm kind of missing nowadays. It's the lore doesn't have too much of an impact onto the game anymore, besides Machina existing, which would be probably the one thing I would want to have removed from the game again.
okay, that's right. No, I think they could even do something easy like Resistance win, here's blue XM for 3 months, Enlightened win, here's green XM for 3 months.
I mean, theoretically, we could just keep the rainbow colored exam as well. Like I think the rainbow colored exam looks way better than like the only white grayish color exam, at least in the Prime scanner. I think it doesn't look as good as it used to in the version 1 scanner. but the rainbow color one actually looks good. So like if it was for me, they could keep it because it actually gives a bit of color to the map as well.
Yeah, I'd be glad if they kept it. But I like Halloween stuff, so as long as it went back to orange and Halloween, and then it could change back to rainbow, that'd be fine by me.
Yeah, that would definitely be a cool thing to keep it, or like be able to choose it yourself if you want to have like only the gray color one, or if you want to have it colorful as well.
Yeah, that'd be great if you just select. I'm sure they could make money from that as well, but
I mean, I've been somebody who has been saying ever since Prime launched, the game has obviously gotten significantly better than the state it launched in 2018. But I've been somebody who's been saying ever since then, I would be glad to like pay full price to AAA games, like 40, 50 euros to be able to get a design back that's similar to the old. That's not like a one-on-one copy from the old client, because obviously the first version of the game had its drawbacks in usability, but there's things that I really don't like about the new client that I really liked about the old one. You don't get to see like the chat anymore, like the first two rows that you have up there. Back in the day, I used to actively like you saw the messages scroll through on the bottom on the com, and you were seeing if there were people next to you. But nowadays that's kind of hidden, and that's something like that I would want to change. There's obviously things like being able to like pop a power cube directly from like the main menu of the game. That's obviously a nice touch.
But you need something like having a redacted skin or like a Pac-Man skin.
Yeah, basically like not basically like a mixture of redacted plus prime. Give me back more of the old like rectangular and like simpler looking UI compared to the round and more flashy one that we have at the moment. I'm not too much a fan of that, but there's obviously like I wouldn't say like neither of them is perfect. Like there's obviously one thing that I personally think would be the best version of both worlds, but it's obviously a taste thing. Yeah, everybody's going to say something else about which parts of which client they like better or worse. Yeah. You'll never be able to have like the version of the game that is perfect. That's obvious.
I was thinking you may have some players now who don't know what the previous scanner was. Maybe they just started on Prime and have no idea. So it'd be nice for them to experience something different as well.
Yeah. And one feature that I keep missing, that I still think that's why I don't call Prime being feature complete with the old client, is being able to hop between portals, like being able to navigate to them and like have an icon on your screen that tells you, okay, that portal is like 450 meters away, and you can click on it and like jump through portals to the next portal, because that was a fun thing to do. Obviously it's not needed anymore because you can just like have a link of the portal, but it was still something that was fun to do. Like, okay, how I'm starting here, how far can I go away by jumping between portals? And it was like a small like nice challenge thing you could do. Somebody with a friend start at the same portal, and who gets to find the portal that is the furthest away by only jumping between portals.
Sounds good. I do remember the old navigate to portal and using that when I first started the game to actually find where the portals were that were nearby. Cause some of them I didn't know if there was a small plaque on a building or something. I want to know where it was. It was handy to be able to navigate and find the actual building, then the portal and do that.
Yeah, exactly. It was just played different, I think. Like when nowadays the game it has obviously changed a lot with Machina being a thing, which I personally would really like to have removed. I think that Machina, the way it is, at least the way it is working right now, and the way it would work probably in most iterations you could make of it, is harmful to a majority of players. It's obviously a thing for players who live in areas where they don't have any opposing players to be able to have some form of gameplay. But on the other hand, like playing against a computer who's obviously doesn't have to travel between portals and just gets to do its thing.
Doesn't have to manage inventory or anything.
It exactly doesn't have to manage inventory. It doesn't have to care about if a portal is in the middle of a forest or if it's on a mountain. It brings you down kind of, because it's not as much fun anymore. Like I used to, together with my dad, who also plays, who I got him to play, we used to build like small local fields with links no longer than like 30 to 40 kilometers. And we were playing against other players, so everybody was moving on the same basis. And there were portals which we basically had like not an agreement, but it was a non-agreement that you wouldn't use those portals because no faction bothered to walk to those portals because they were like in terrible places to reach. Some player had passed them at some point, but neither side bothered to actually capture those portals unless you really wanted to annoy the other side, which basically never happened. But nowadays you have Machina having a level 8 portal with links in all directions on it, and Machina didn't have to walk like 3-4 kilometers through the forest on a mountain to actually capture that portal. And that's what feels annoying about it, because you know that it did not have to actually physically get up that mountain to capture that portal, but it still did, and it still blocks you.
You didn't have to go and buy a ticket to get into a theme park, but you could still claim all the portals there in the off season, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Things like that. Or like theme parks, mountains, like if you live in a mountainous area and you have like 2 portals link across that are on top of mountains during the winter, if you're unlucky, you're unable to take those portals down. Unless you were to rent a helicopter or something like that.
Yeah, no, definitely an issue, but I think Machinus probably staying around. I know way back in the original interview they talked about other factions being able to control Machina for their benefit. I was hoping to see that happen at some point. So say if Enlightened won, they could use Machina to go in certain areas or clear it from certain areas.
That would be nice thing to have as an reward for winning an anomaly, for example. I would say that the amount of total like global operations on like both factions, like if I look at the like past, like I mean obviously the visibility of those global ops has decreased significantly with Google Plus no longer being a thing. I think that Google Plus dying had a major hit at visibility for like lore and like things that were done by agents to gain visibility, because Google Plus still had a lower entrance barrier because everybody had a Google account, everybody was able to log in, compared to having to register on the forum and log into the forum. And now with no forum existing at all and people having to use Reddit, which is its own entire topic anyway, I think that even brings the visibility further down. But then I personally feel like, I don't know if it's actually the case because like the visibility is not there anymore. That the amount of like global operations, which are like cross-country, cross-continent, has significantly decreased over like the past 6 to 7 years. Like when we still used to have the Ingress Ingress news every, what was it? I think every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks that there was a new video. You were constantly hearing about, okay, Resistance built a field somewhere in Asia that was spanning across 3-4 countries, Enlightened built a field there, and you were actively like getting to see that people were building something together and maybe inspiring yourself to find other people and build larger fields or field art or starbursts or whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, and you often get emails with like agent spotlight on, like, these agents have done XYZ. Why don't you go out there and do this kind of thing as well? Was helpful to see what agents are doing, what was active. It was helpful to me when I had no clue what I was doing to see what other people were doing to help me learn what I should do.
Yeah. And I also think something like, I know that people, at least some Enlightened people that I know will be pissed at me for me saying that, but I really want global shards back and not the cross-faction global shards. I want the actual global shards back. I know that it's a lot of work from both factions to like playing the game, playing global shards, because there's a lot of work involved in like getting the shards around the world, but I still like, I only got it to watch it from the sidelines in 2017. But I really liked it, like from like a spectator perspective, and I would have really loved to be able to participate in it. But there was no shard passing through locally, so I didn't get the chance to do that. But I would really love to be able to like experience that again.
Do you think that's something they might do for shared memories, like a global thing there? I was just thinking in my head that if you just remove a letter, then you've got shard memories instead.
I mean, that would be cool. I also think that the current way that most global events are done is not a good way for doing the game, because if you constantly look at the global events, I know it might sound biased, but like if you look at the stats, it's usually around 1%, 2% more points for resistance compared to enlightened, and that's probably very likely just the regular player distribution. So both factions
Numbers game,
are able to like activate roughly the same amount of people in their own factions, but it's just like the other one faction, like it cannot be that both factions have exactly the same number of players. That's like that wouldn't happen. And in this case, currently Resistance has a slight amount of more players, and with both factions being able to roughly activate the same percentage of players within their teams, and people playing roughly the same amount, like averaged out, that's how it's going to end. And I think that's not a very good way of playing the game, because as it is right now, it would take tremendous amounts of effort for the faction with the lower amount of players to be able to actually surpass the others. If you have like events that are purely number based, because like what do you want to do? Like the other faction has more players, the likelihood for them to be able to win it is significantly higher, and I don't think that's a good way to have people have engaged in a global event, because you already know beforehand how it's likely going to end. Obviously, you can try to make the effort and push over the line and try to win it, but for everything that is purely attendance based, and I think that's the same for like anomalies, like we used to have them in the past. If you have like a pure cluster game and you have one faction that has like 60% more players at the anomaly side, it's obvious they are likely going to win because they have more inventory, they have more players to defend and attack portals. That's just how it's going to end. That's why I really like things like the rule sets we have with shards, and or like we used to have in the back in time with like a field frenzy and longest link, or I mean, I think not many people like the media type of stuff, but I still think that like these types of rule sets for anomalies also requires you not to only be like the faction with the most players present, but also have to think about how you're going to actually play the event and have a proper strategy, which I think is the most important part of Ingress. Being it an agent game and having to strategize and not be, okay, we're the team with the most players attending, and that's why we're going to win.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's going to
with...
happen if you have like it was last year during the event in South Africa we had. I think there were like 8 resistance agents and 3 enlightened agents participating. It's obvious that that's going to be a difficult uphill battle to win if you have like more than double the amount of players from the opposing faction. But it's like such a low attendance number that I wouldn't really count it like as a proper event that's where these rules would apply to, because even if you were to play by strategy there, you're likely not going to win because the other players are like twice the amount.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard some anomalies in some locations, people are a bit defeatist, like, oh, enlightened always win in this country, or resistance always win here because they're more numbers basically, and sometimes it sounds like some agents give up before they even start in these.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you look at like the global scale, it's usually okay. Japan usually goes to the enlightened. Rest of Asia depends on the country and how many people are willing to travel to that site. Europe has been and still mostly is a resistance dominated continent, and the US I think tends to be more enlightened, especially the West Coast, and South America also like depends on which country you're in, if which faction is going to win, but depending on how many people travel. And I think trying to make a rule set that favors strategy more compared to like attendance numbers makes upsets possible, because obviously like the likelihood that the faction with more players is going to win will still exist, because if you have more people, you have more people to attack and defend. That's very obvious, but it makes it possible to have like an upset in a country where you always think, oh no, we're never gonna win. Like taking for example Nuremberg in 2019, like enlightened winning in Germany is something you wouldn't think of happening, but it still happened. things like that, like being able to have a good rule set that enables you to have an upset, which happened back then. Like you had the media, you had portal captures, and the average hack, how many unique portals you hacked. It enabled it to win. Like it was a close win, but it still was possible, even though the attendance number would have favored resistance. But that rule set enabled an upset. But if you were to play a pure cluster battle, that's obviously very unlikely to happen.
And just thinking about what you said with your father who you got playing, do you think things would change balance-wise if there was incentive to recruit people to Ingress, if you could get more agents started?
Probably, very likely, because I think there's communities at the moment, and my local community is nothing different, where there's too few players to actually like being able to engage in community activities, which I think is a big part of Ingress that keeps Ingress alive as a game, because it's such an integral part of being able to play with others together. I don't know when we last had a farm with 8 people showing up. Like I cannot remember. It must have been sometime in 2018 or maybe 2019. In my local community. Like our community has probably lost like 60 to 70% of its players compared to 2018.
Do you think that's partly pandemic related or other reasons?
Like one big chunk, Resistance and Enlightened stopped when Prime released, like in 2018. They didn't play till 2019 to see if Prime got better, or most of them didn't. Some have come back and like played occasionally, like you'll see them like pop in a resonator or two like every couple of months. But most said, okay, chapter is over. I've played this game for 6-7 years now, ever since it launched in beta. It's chapter of the life is over. I'm gonna move on to other things. That's what many people did. And the pandemic, obviously, that was like the massive second hit of people stopping to play because they couldn't go out, and like there were no community events. The first Saturdays online kept some of those people. We managed to do a first Saturday on-site last month again. So in May we had our first on-site first Saturday since we had, I think, 12 people show up.
That's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. So that was nice to see people again, because our last first Saturday was in February 2020. So it had been over 4 years that we hadn't seen some people.
Okay, good to see people, like you say, doing Ingress community events again.
Yeah, I think that being able to do these events like keeps the community together, even cross-faction wise. Because if there's no other faction, there's no point in playing, obviously. Because like Machina is not a replacement for the opposing faction. Like there's not the satisfaction of like knowing, okay, I know this player just walked around like for 3-4 hours and built this multi-layer field. I'm gonna go and take down the anchor of their field now. And the other person being able to, okay, they took down my anchor. I'm gonna go pop in a soft bank in there and just build it up again.
Yeah.
And being able to win that Septi cycle.
I know we've gone through quite a few things you'd like to see added to the game, removed from the game, altered. If the Ingress team's listening and you could tell them one thing to change or one thing you want them to know, what would it be? Yeah,
get rid of Machina. Honestly, get rid of Machina and make recursing more interesting.
Sounds like some good ideas. I personally quite like Machina for someone that didn't have many things to do, but I can see it's annoying in, like I said, theme parks, big mountain ranges, things like that. So maybe if it was a bit more limited.
For example, you could restrict it to dense areas, like restrict it to cities or something like that. But coming from a country where like half the country is mountains, it's difficult to play here in Austria. Having portals pop up everywhere that are in places where you cannot just like drive up to or take a 15-minute walk there, that's annoying to play against.
Yeah, I can understand that. And then obviously you've mentioned the Prime Memes Telegram channel a fair bit. Is there any other place you'd like people to find you, or is that the best place you'd like them to go and like share their memes?
If people want to, they can obviously join the Prime Meme. The Telegram handle is Prime Meme. all written together. That's the Prime Memes channel. There's also in the description of the channel, there's also the bot linked where you can send in submissions for memes. And yeah, if people want to find me, like they can find me everywhere under GeoZukunft. But Prime Memes is usually the place to be. I'll also probably do some live meme coverage of the anomalies in Budapest and Rotterdam, like I did in Munich 2 years ago. So if
You're
people
planning on
find me,
attending any?
I'm attending both anomalies. Yeah. So if
Okay.
people find me, they can get a Prime Memes buy card as well, which has a meme on it, obviously.
Have you got any plans for the Q3 anomalies, or is that to be planned out and thought about?
That's still TBD. I might go to the Japan site in September, but that's not set in stone yet.
Probably the anomalies are out for me for a bit, maybe till Q4, but I'm always hopeful for a UK anomaly so I don't have to travel far.
Yeah, like I went to the France site and to Oslo last year. So that was the 2 anomalies I attended on site. Everything else I was doing remote.
So far, I only got the Brighton Echo anomaly under my belt, but hope to do a few more at some point.
Yeah, Brighton Echo. I was operating for that, or dispatching, how Resistance calls it.
Okay. Thank you very much for speaking with us, Gio. I'll include links to the Prime Memes channel and anything else we need to in the show notes. But we'll now move on to our next section. Thank you, agents, for listening to this episode of the Ingress Insights podcast. Next week, we should be going over the XM anomalies for Kuching and Budapest and seeing the results from there. In the meantime, if there's any other news that comes up, we're covering that. And then looking forward to announcements for Q3 and then seeing what that brings for us. But I hope you have a great Sunday and happy hacking, agents.